Coming up in this week's Torah Pearls.
Why do we have two different lists presented as diet in Leviticus 11 and Deuteronomy 14? Are they both from God, neither from God?
Did an earlier text suggest that Nadab and Abihu were the only two sons of Aaron?
What is strange fire? And were Aaron's sons drinking on the job?
How are we to explain the absurdity and brutality of chapter 10?
What is the center point of the Torah according to the rabbis?
Does Jehovah eat the fat of the sacrifice?
Jono, let's jump in.
Let's do it. G'day, dear viewers, and thank you for your company once again here on truth2u.org, truth number 2 letter u.org. I'm Jono Vandor, and joining me from the Horeb Institute in Louisiana is the author of the Moses Scroll, Mr. Ross Nichols. G'day, mate.
Hello, Jono. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing pretty well, and you're pretty flat out at the moment. You are building and repairing and renovating, and for the conference that's coming up in what, about a week? Is it a week?
That's right. Yeah, the 24th, 25th, I'm sorry, 25, 26, 27 April. And listen, Jono, just because you brought it up, it's a United Israel World Union Conference. United Israel was founded in 1944. Of course, you know this. And every year there is an annual meeting that we, the officers and board, combine with sort of a biblical bonanza conference kind of thing. So anyway, so that's that weekend here in Jackson, Louisiana, where the Horeb Institute proudly sits in this nice little town. And I'm going to tell the viewers here, if they want to come, this is a last-minute deal. They can register. I'll put the link in the description. There is no cost to attend the conference. It's going to be fantastic. However, they have to register, and they have to be confirmed by me. In other words, we're almost at capacity, but if, say some of our viewers say, I'd really like to go to that, and they get it in, like right now, tonight, while they're watching us.
Do it tonight, because you are almost at capacity. I know that, and there is really limited room there. So if you want to be a part of that, make sure you act quickly. Link in the description, right?
That's right.
Time for season 3 of Torah Pearls, Ross. Brought to you by Tanakh Tours. Tanakh Tours. Hey, you and I were talking just a little bit earlier on. James, G'day, James, has just returned from Israel. What has he been doing there in Israel? He's been
I tell you, He's been filming. He's been filming with our good friend Simcha Yakovovich.
Right.
They've been doing some naked archaeology and filming several seasons. I don't know exactly what seasons they're filming, but I'm sure it's exciting. And who cares? It's going to be something good. Right?
For those who aren't familiar with Simcha, when you say they're filming some naked archaeology, I think you need to sort of explain that just a little bit.
No, I don't want to explain. I just want them to think about Dr. Tabor and Simcha filming naked archaeology.
Anyway, so they've been all over Israel. They've been having a great time. And I noticed our friend Ariel over there in
Ariel Tzion.
In Susia, was saying, listen, it's safe, it's great. Tourism is happening. Come over and enjoy Israel, which is what James has just been doing. So anyway, TanakhTours.com, TANAKH, TanakhTours.com. Speaking of a little bit of room, we do have a little bit of room left, both on the Egypt and Jordan tour and on the Israel tour. Go to the website in the description. And if you want to join Ross and myself on these tours, we would love your company. Now, speaking of United Israel, Ross, we did have on the group a question. And this question was from Patricia. G'day, Patricia. And,
hey, Patricia.
She asked a good question. And this is off the back of us mentioning a verse in the opening discussions of the last couple of portions. And this was you and I trying to pad out a little bit of time, because we are, of course, in the book of Leviticus.
I love Leviticus.
Doesn't everybody love Leviticus?
They should.
But we've been taking the opportunity just to address a few comments and questions. Anyway, that verse that we have been talking about is Ezekiel 20, verse 25. And what she's basically saying, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what she's saying is she cannot bring herself to believe that God would give Israel, he would give Israel laws that are not good by which they cannot live. Is that basically the gist of it?
That is the gist of it. And I would like to agree with that. I really would.
Yeah. And she ends her comment, the post actually, by saying basically he's giving them, she wants to believe that he's giving them up to their own devices. Go do your own thing, since you have rejected me by rebellion. And yes, it would be nice if that is what it said. And actually, and I responded in this thread by saying, this is basically what Psalm 81 verses 12 and 13 says. It says, so I let them go after their stubbornness of their heart, that they might walk in their own counsel. Oh, that my people would hearken unto me, that Israel would walk in my ways. And that's very much on par with what she wants Ezekiel 20:25 to say. But it's not what 20:25 says. What does it say, Ross?
Well, let me just, to kind of piggyback just for a moment off what you just said, she writes, Patricia Moody writes an excellent post. It really is good. And she highlights other verses which say what it is that she wishes, she doesn't use wishes, that's my language, that she is presenting as the interpretation, the intended meaning of Ezekiel 20. And by the way, Ezekiel 20, how many passages she brings this up? Does it say, if a man does these, he'll live by them? If a man does these, he'll live by them. I think it's 4 or 5 times. So again, she writes an excellent post. But the point that you and I have made, and the point that I responded on this post with, is that is not what it says in 2025. In 2025, it says very clearly something that is very uncomfortable to a lot of people. It says, this is God speaking according to the intended meaning of the writing. It says, I gave them statutes, God speaking, that were not good, and judgments that they could not live by them. And now that brings up the things that you just said, and some people have commented on this. Well, what does that mean, Ross? Are you suggesting that God gave them statutes that were not good and that they couldn't live by, when it says in chapter 20 that the man who does them will live by them? And my answer is this: I'm only saying what the text says. That's what it says. Now, what else is there to say on this, Jono? I mean, we can go deep on it if you'd like.
I did go a little deeper in the comments of this post, and I just highlighted that in regards to Ezekiel 20 verse 25, there are similar verses, and one of them is in Ezekiel, and that's from chapter 14 verses 6 to 9, and it says, now say to the house of Israel, thus says the Lord God, repent and turn back from your fetishes, and turn your minds away from all your abominations. For if any man of the house of Israel, or of the strangers who dwell in Israel, breaks away from me and turns his thoughts upon his fetishes, and sets his mind upon the sins through which he stumbles, and goes to the prophet to inquire of me through him, I, the Lord, will respond to him directly. I will set my face against that man, and I will make him a sign and a byword. I will cut him off from the midst of my people. Then you shall know that I am the Lord. And if a prophet is seduced and does speak a word to such a man, it is I, the Lord, who seduced that prophet. I will stretch out my hand against him and destroy him from among my people Israel, and they shall bear their punishment. So,
explain the connection there. What's your connection?
What it's saying is that God will seduce the prophet to tell the man who seeks, what he wants to hear in regards to his own fetishes and so on and so forth. And we have something similar in 1 Kings chapter 22. And I love this story, by the way. I think it's such a cool story. Yeah. And this is the prophet Micaiah. And he is reluctantly consulted after consulting all of the other prophets that tell the kings what they want to hear before they go into battle.
Yeah.
And Micaiah, is it Jehoshaphat, I think? He says, look, go and get a real prophet of God. All of these guys, I just don't know. And is it, who are the two kings? Is it Ahab Ahab, who we got
I haven't
here?
read the story recently.
Well, we've got to look it up. No, we've got to get it.
Yeah,
because
go ahead. You look it up.
It really is a lot of fun. 1 Kings chapter 22, verses 19 and on. People should have a look at this because it's kind of funny. I mean, it's not funny, but it is a little bit of.
So you're saying it's not ha funny, but it's kind of odd, maybe.
Funny. It's kind of odd, maybe. Right. And 1 Kings chapter 22. It'd be good if I was in the correct chapter. There we go.
Yeah, that's right.
It always helps.
Because I'm waiting on you. I have another one. Go ahead.
You've got another one. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I do.
The whole thing is great. Now, people need to. It is Jehoshaphat and Ahab, and he's like, I don't want to get this guy because he always says bad stuff about me.
That's right.
And everything that he says, and so they really grill him. And Micaiah, in the end, he says, "Look, I saw God and among the heavenly hosts, if you like. It's kind of like Isaiah chapter 6."
That's where I'm going
Isaiah
next.
Chapter 6. I'll let you do that one.
Don't do it.
You do that. Yeah. You do that. And he says, and God is speaking to all the angels or whatever they are, the heavenly hosts, and says, how shall we entice Ahab? How are we going to lead him astray? And one of them says, "Oh, I know. I'll go and be, I'll be a lying spirit in his ear. Yeah. I'll go and tell him what he wants to hear and entice him, and I'll just lie to him blatantly." And God says, "Yeah, good one, done.
That's a good one.
That's a good idea."
Yeah.
Okay, good. Now you say.
Okay, so wait a minute. Let's just recap just for a moment. I know we've got a lot to cover, but so far we've got Ezekiel 20:25, which may mean something else, but it says, "I gave them statutes that weren't good and judgments whereby they couldn't live." Okay, so that's one thing. Then you just said that he told a prophet, "Go lie in that guy's ear." That sounds good. Now, in Isaiah 6, as you pointed out, in the year that King Uzziah died, Isaiah sees a vision. This is the call of the prophet Isaiah. Look at verse 8. "Then I heard the voice of my Lord saying, 'Whom shall I send? Who will go for us?' And I said, 'Here am I, send me.' And he said, 'Go, say to that people, hear indeed, but don't understand, see indeed, but do not grasp. Dull that people's mind, Jono, stop its ears and seal its eyes, lest, seeing with its eyes and hearing with its ears, it will also grasp with its mind and repent and be saved.'" So in other words, we've got strange things going on. Two of the three examples are envisioned as taking place in the throne room. And behind the scenes is God at least allowing, in some cases, seemingly directing the misdirection of the people, oddly enough.
Yeah.
Are you looking up another one, or is
I've got another one? It just reminded me of something else, and we're in First Chronicles, and I do think it is chapter 21. It is chapter 21, verse 1 that says, "Satan, Hasatan, arose against Israel and incited David to number Israel." But if we go back, I think, if I remember correctly, and I'm sure this is familiar in your mind, it is Jehovah that entices him to do that. So here, I think we have the Book of Chronicles is characterizing Jehovah as a adversary, the Satan, that incites David to number the people, with which God is angry with him about for doing.
And is it not? Am I imagining, if I remembered this wrongly, isn't the harmonistic account elsewhere in the Bible, does it not read differently there? I'm just going to make a note and check that later. But
maybe it is connecting the dots by which we come to that conclusion. It might be the connecting of the dots. I'd have to look at it, but I'm pretty sure that is the case. That this is what the Tanakh puts forward, is that God acts as a Satan to David, inciting him to number the people, for which God is angry with him over, and eventually results in the slaughter of or the death of 70,000 Israelites. The remedy of which, and it's an angel of death, if you like, somewhat similar to the Passover. And the reason why they die is because God entices David to do this, and then God is angry at David for doing this, and David then says to God, "Do you reckon, like the time that my child, my baby with Bathsheba died? Do you think also you can pass this sin on as well?" And God's like, "Yeah, I can do that." And so 70,000 Israelites died at the hand of the angel of death. And at which point David says, "Oh, you know what? Maybe this is a bit harsh. Is there anything we can do about this?" And the remedy is to build an altar on Mount Moriah, and then we end up with the Temple Mount. This is how the Temple Mount happens. And God says, "Okay, angel, that's enough of that. Stop killing everyone." The whole thing is just crazy. But that's another example, Ross.
Story time. Bible story time with Jono is just not that uplifting. I can tell you, I feel the heat.
I'm just telling you what's in the text, Ross. This is in the text.
I know, and that's my point. So when someone comes up with a great example, as we have here on the United Israel World Union group page, it is something that's thought-provoking, and thanks, Patricia, for posting that.
Exactly.
But
that's
just
right.
so you know, my point in bringing up Ezekiel 20:25, particularly when I'm dealing with the subject of sacrifices, it highlights the tension in the text. People can say it means something else, but it's what it says. And Jono, one more point. What I try to do, for good or for bad, is when I teach the Bible, I say, here's what it says, and it means what it says.
Yes.
People who, now that works for people's advantage, sometimes against, but people who don't like what it says, for whatever reason, they say, this is what it says, but it means something else.
Yeah.
And look, could that be the case? Maybe it is. As I brought up in my last class on Saturday morning, I said, if there was a way that this could be said that was less confusing, that would have been great, because that's not what it says. See, so it really does come down to read what it says.
Read what it says. And it's great because, as you point out, the reason why we highlight so bluntly these passages is to raise discussion and questions and comments. And people should really, by all means, if you are a true student of the Bible, you ought to wrestle. You ought to wrestle with the plain text and what it says, the words on the page. Now I think we should just keep going with this until we get to our Torah portion, but that does raise the question which Marianne asks in the thread, and she does ask some very, very thoughtful questions. She said, so what scriptures show those statutes that were not good and judgments they couldn't live by that God supposedly gave? And I responded to that, and I said, well, Ezekiel 20 verse 26 cites the following. It says, they set aside every firstborn issue of the womb. Well, where do we go to find that? And what we find, Ross, is the e-source material from Exodus chapter 13, and particularly in verse 12, which says, it says that specifically, you shall set apart for the Lord every first issue of the womb, every male firstling that your cattle drop shall be the Lord's. Every firstling donkey you shall redeem with a sheep, and if you don't redeem it, you got to break its neck. So that sounds a little bit like
that horrifies me to hear that you're going to break a donkey's neck, and you're going to slaughter all the animals. I mean, this is what it says in Ezekiel 20:25. He gave them these statutes, and then in context, it has to do with these brutal slaughterings, and then it just says, that I did this to horrify them. Now, people can say it means something other than what it says, but that's what it says.
But that's what it says. Continuing with the e-source from the end of, as soon as the Ten Commandments are finished, and, thankfully we have the Moses Scroll, my goodness. But where it stops lifting material from the Moses Scroll, at the end of chapter 20, all the way through to about halfway through chapter 24, that's all e-source material. And in 22 verse 28, it says the following, You shall not put. Oh, hang on. Sorry. Yeah, no, that's right. 22 verse 28. You shall not put off the skimming of the first yield of your vats. You shall give me the firstborn. You shall give me the firstborn among your sons. Mm-hmm. You shall do the same with your cattle and your flocks. It doesn't. I don't know that it goes into detail of breaking the necks, and no, it doesn't. It doesn't. It just says, "Give it to me. Give me that." And some commentators, Ross, have said, "Look, is it possible that there was a community of Israelites or a large portion of Israelites, just some, a sect that took that seriously in the sense of child sacrifice or something like that?" Perhaps.
Let's hope not. Let's hope not. But Jeremiah 7, not suggesting that in Jeremiah 7 and Gehenna and the valley, where all this bad stuff's taking place. But there is some stuff that's really, a lot of child sacrifice, according to the text, is going on there. But even if this means that it's the sacrifice of the animals, it looks like this Ezekiel 20:25 is you're bringing us straight to the place where it's quoted.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, that's where it is. I mean, we have nowhere else in the text to point to, and so I would say not only is it these verses that Ezekiel is potentially referencing, but it's that e-source document, that whole thing. And why stop there? I mean, this is probably an example of that. Anyway, so that is in answer to that question. It's an excellent question that Patricia raises and comments on.
See there, boys and girls, if you engage and you write thoughtful comments and very well thought out, very well articulated comments, it gives us some good material to discuss.
And I'll tell you what, while we're in the comments section, let's keep going with this just quickly. Okay. In last week's program, couple of comments and questions here. Here's a comment from John Doe, which I kind of suspect, Ross, is not his real name. But John Doe writes, he says, "Hey, Ross, have you read Jacob Wright's book, Why the Bible Began, published in April 2024? It goes into a lot of detail how the Hebrew Bible was rewritten in exile and favors the priestly perspective, displacing an earlier king perspective of the North Territories." Have you read that one?
Look at this. Answer to the question is no, I've not read it. It is on a short stack, and it's very high in the list of books that I want to read and that I will read. It's even every year, by the way, particularly I revise it. I do it in January to go with the Gregorian calendar, and the crowd gasp that I even recognize that pagan New Year. But then when the first month of the Hebrew calendar rolls around, I revise my list. And this year, this is one of a few books that I have that I want to read. And I would just say, I don't know Jacob personally, but I'm wondering if Jacob Wright has read the Moses Scroll, because it may cause him to ask why I wrote Why the Bible Began. I don't know. Maybe it would help him too. So maybe I'll read his book. He reads mine, the Moses Scroll. We'll see.
There you go. All right. Well, that's good. Now that reminds me. Yeah. See, you are much more the bookworm than I am, and I tend to. I'm very lucky to have a theological library where I go and study, and I tend to use it. I live in the reference section, Ross. And that is the way that I read. Whereas you just go and get books and read the whole books. And yesterday, Alistair had me in a new book, which was, you know what it was? It was Alter, Robert Alter, actually.
Okay.
And what is the name of this book? The book is, because I started reading it and I thought, you know what, this is pretty cool. Hang on, I'm just looking now.
I love Robert Alter, by the way.
Yeah, well, we had it on the shelf. This book is The Art of Biblical Translation, and it's got a lot of really cool stuff. Anyway, so that's where I am at the moment. But you are certainly much more of a bookworm than I am. We also had.
By the way, thanks, John. Thanks, John Doe, for that question, because it always helps, even though it's on my list and I want to read it. It helps for someone to say, "Hey, Ross, did you read that book?" Because I'll take that as maybe some heavenly message that I should bump that up on my priority list. So go ahead, Jono.
C.G. Mickelson, I'm 27, I'm just going to read this one. last week said, thank you once again. Always love the show. A professor of religious studies said to me once about the Bible, if you peel away the onion, there's nothing there. I disagree with him. I believe that when you peel off all the human additions and subtractions, however well-intentioned, you are left with the short and sweet 10 subjects of God. It clears up a lot of confusion. Shabbat shalom. It sounds like this person has read the Moses Scroll. So
sounds like,
I like
or they're very well informed otherwise.
Yeah, that's right. Speaking of books, Jenkins anyway,
okay.
Jenkins says, I humbly suggest someday that you get time to read through the works of Milgram and J. Schuyler on Leviticus.
Did you see I replied to that one?
You replied to that one. You've read that one already.
It's not just one. On my desk and in the comment section, in the description of this video, I have Milgram's full set, which is the Anchor Bible Dictionary in 3 volumes.
I love the Anchor.
And the individual volume on Leviticus. So I wrote very respectfully to this person that reading those views put forward by Milgram, at least, did not change my view of the sacrificial system. It didn't. In fact, Milgram is an excellent scholar. I highly recommend his work. And if I propose to people that if they actually do study Milgram, they will see what we're talking about, and that is some very heavy tension in the text.
Yesterday in the library, I had a stack of Anchor commentaries, Exodus and Leviticus, in front of me. And I love it. I think it's it's one of my favorite go-tos as far as commentaries are concerned. And so if people can get their hands on that, highly recommend it.
Yeah.
Now you'll be disappointed to learn, Ross, that the Michael Smith that we were talking about, quoting his comments last week, is not Michael W. Smith, the 80s Christian pop star.
Well, I thought it was, and I'm not disappointed because, but I really thought that we had some big time pop star that was following our work. But anyway,
he responded and he confirmed that he's not that. He said, he describes himself a little bit. He says, I'm an ex-Christian who has discovered that Yeshua was a Torah observant, Torah teaching rabbi, and that all of his disciples were Torah observant and Torah teaching too. I like James Tabor a lot. And so do we. And
we like James, yeah.
We like James. Cannot agree with his naturalistic anti-supernaturalism approach to the scriptures, nor do I accept his conclusions. You know James better than I when it comes to his works. And naturalistic anti-supernaturalism, what do you think that might be?
I almost thought of Mary Poppins, supercalifragilistic. No, but seriously though, Michael Smith, I don't want to miss again on something that Michael said, but I think what he might be intending is Tabor is a historian. And so he's very much going to approach the text from a historical, critical, natural tendency. I think his view is that Jesus of Nazareth, from a historical standpoint, is dead and not divine. And so maybe that might be what Michael is talking about. So please, Michael, if that's not what you're talking about, I assume that might be, but that's just kind of a guess, yeah.
Yeah, well, he goes on to say, but other than that, he's a great guy. He is a great guy.
He is a great guy. And if Michael met him, they would probably hit it off very well. James is probably one of the most personable people I know, particularly in the scholarly world. I mean, a lot of scholars won't take the time, but James always has found time for people who love the Bible as much as he does. So,
there you go.
Michael, write us again, and I might hook you up with a personal, introduction.
There you go. So he goes on to say, look, thanks for taking the time to address my concerns about AI. And even though you poo-pooed my concerns, I think that time will prove me right. So I think he's put money down saying that eventually we're going to be worshipping Ezra. I'm not sure if that's what he means. He's put a laughing face after that. So he's taking it in jest.
Is Ezra here tonight?
Yeah, I was about to say, we've got to bring Ezra in. Oh, he said, by the way, I'm no fundamentalist. So, interesting character, Al Michael Smith.
Welcome to the show, and thanks for being a good sport, Michael. It's good to know you.
Time for some idolatry, Ross. Where is Ezra? We are supposed to be in. Where are we now? Shemini. That's where we are. That's right. And this Shemini. Is from Leviticus chapter 9 to the end of chapter 11, I think, or is it the end? Yeah, the end of chapter 11.
That's right.
So Ezra, our AI critical scholar, come on, give us a little bit of a critical summary of our Torah portion.
Shemini is one of those portions that jolts us. We move from the joy of priestly inauguration to a sudden, shocking interruption. It opens with the 8th day, Shemini, when Aaron and his sons begin their official priestly duties. There's a palpable sense of climax here. Fire comes out from before Yahweh, consuming the offering, and the people fall on their faces. Everything seems to be working exactly as planned. And then, boom, Nadab and Abihu offer what the text calls strange fire. And they're consumed by that same divine fire. No explanation, no second chances, just silence and death. From a text-critical angle, many scholars see this as an ideological tale, explaining why only certain priests have access and how ritual precision maintains cosmic order. The priestly writer P is extremely concerned with the sanctity of the cult, and this story reinforces that with brutal clarity. After that, the portion transitions into priestly regulations, rules about mourning, eating, and maintaining ritual purity. And then we get a sudden shift, dietary laws. This is classic priestly structuring. From the sanctuary to the body, the same holiness that governs the tabernacle now governs the dinner table. What makes Shemini compelling is that it's not just about ritual, it's about the weight of access to the divine. It warns us that holiness is not safe, even when it's celebrated.
When he describes the tabernacle with the body, I just had this flash of being on the Tanakh tour at Biblical Shiloh, and we're standing around that hologram. Is it hologram or holograph? Hologram?
No, hologram,
and the tabernacle comes up, and Rabbi Singer, our friend Tovia, is right there with us, and he goes into this description of the tabernacle, comparing it to a body, and the mouth and the heart and... Anyway,
the countenance of God. Yeah,
that's right. The face and so forth. The 7 eyes and very, very typical rabbinic type approach. But it was interesting. Yeah. All right.
Yeah. Well, the thing that stood out to me about what Ezra just said is the word brutal. I think
brutal.
I think that is certainly a summary of chapter 10. It is absolutely brutal, and we will be unpacking that. But there's a mixed bag. There's a mixed bag, and we're going to dive into it now. It begins, Ross, this way, chapter 9, verse 1. On the 8th day, Ross, Moses called Aaron and his sons and the elders of Israel. What is the significance of the 8th day? Go ahead.
It's inauguration day, boys and girls. We were told in the last Torah portion that they had to wait, the full week. And at the end of the full week, the 8th day would be the day. And so we have a little teeny tiny piece of narrative in Leviticus surrounded by a bunch of laws presented as if they're communicated by God to Moses at Sinai. So they're at the foot of Sinai. This whole thing it fits between Exodus 25 and Numbers chapter 10, verse 11, when Israel was at Sinai. This is right there in the middle. And what I find interesting is, and we pointed this out, but just to touch it one more time, Exodus 40 is Leviticus 8. So you have to pull those two together, because in Exodus 40, it's a different hand, a different version, but it basically says that that Aaron and the boys are ordained, consecrated, and anointed, and here that it happens in Leviticus 8. So,
and here it happens, and in 9 verse 3, it says, "Speak to the Israelites," so to all the Israelites, Ross, saying, "All of you guys, take a he-goat for a sin offering, a calf and a lamb, and a yearling without blemish for a burnt offering." It goes on to say, and an ox and a ram for an offering of well-being to sacrifice before the Lord, and a meal offering with oil mixed in. For today, the the Lord will appear to you. On verse 3, where it says, say to the Israelites, the Jewish Study Bible points out in the notes, it says in P, and this is where we are, of course, just to remind everybody, we're still solidly in the priestly material. In P, all are responsible for the eradication of impurities from the divine abode. And that is what this whole system is about, the eradication of impurities from the divine abode, from the sanctuary, Ross.
I know people might, we have experts in religious police. They'll probably jump in and say, I can't believe you don't know this. But when I read that, if you look at the verbs in Hebrew, and to the sons of Israel, you shall speak, you shall say, that's going to be masculine singular. But then, take ye these hairy goats, these male goats, that is plural, as you point out. So is this saying, I know the note that you just covered said that it's the responsibility of the whole congregation. But because this is in the plural, is it that does the ye represent, because if you're let's say you're Moses and you're standing there, you're talking to 603,550 males, plus women, children, and so forth. And you said, hey, y'all, take ye, and then you go through the sacrifice, a sin offering, a he-goat, a calf, and a lamb without blemish. Is that for everybody? Because that's a lot of animals.
That's almost 2 million animals. That's a lot of animals. I think what is being said here is take a single goat, I hope, for all of y'all, all right? So all y'all,
right.
On behalf of all of you. It's a little bit kind of, I guess, what is it? A little bit of Day of Atonement-y sort of a thing, this inauguration day. And an inauguration day seems to be a one-off. It's like, I don't know that this is something that they're going to be doing all of the time, but for this particular ceremony, I think they are taking
Let's hope
one
so.
of each animal on behalf of the people for these purposes.
Take ye. So the address is plural. Y'all take a singular goat, a calf, and a lamb. Gotcha.
I think so.
All right.
And the purpose of this is, as I just read at the end of verse 4, for today the Lord will appear to you. If I could put a subheading above this section, it would be conjuring theophany. Conjuring theophany. Okay. This seems to be, Ross, they are preparing for what they're hoping will be, at least the priestly writer is hoping, to create a national revelation to rival that of Horeb or Sinai.
Because P, let me just ask you, is that because P doesn't really focus on what took place at Horeb?
Doesn't focus on it at all, doesn't have any of that material. For P, it's all about the tabernacle. It's all about their office. It's for their benefit. And for that reason, they have a different set of laws and they have a different national revelation. And what we're going to see, or what we're about to read, is preparing for that. So it goes on in verse 6. It says, "This is what the Lord has commanded that you do, that the presence of the Lord might appear to you." And this is Moses saying this. So it's a magical concoction that to invoke the visual manifestation of Jehovah. The interesting thing about this is that the Lord commanded, Ross, the Lord commanded. Where and when did the Lord command such? So this is another example. We've talked about this in past Torah portions, where Moses says, here is a commandment of the Lord, and we have absolutely no indication where that came from. It reminds me a little bit of, like, we have examples of where God is like saying to Moses, hey, let me show you the pattern of everything that I like, and let's do a little, this is the way I want the decor to look and the curtains to look, and here's a pattern, right? And then Moses goes down and says, we're going to make this according to the pattern. We're going to do that. And it's basically repeating, and then they do it. But then there are sections, a few introductions of commandments that are just laundered into the text, subtly laundered into the text, for which we have no precedent. Another example of that would be Exodus chapter 32, verse 27. And maybe that was one of the ones that we highlighted in previous Torah portions, where Moses says, "Thus says the Lord, all you Levites, strap on the sword and go start killing people." This is after the golden calf incident. Another one is in Numbers chapter 30, verse 2. People can look that up, where a commandment is just laundered into the text. And I mean, look, I would argue, Ross, that all of this stuff is added much later and is attributed to the divine, but is not. So all of it is laundered into the text.
You think this is clearly traceable to a later priestly hand, is what you're saying?
I really, really think so, and I feel very confident in saying it that bluntly, because once people familiarize themselves with the Moses scroll, you see that you are dealing with with two very, very different texts, two very different gods that are demanding two very different things. One involves a whole lot of blood and guts and fat and all of this sort of sacrifice and altars and pedantic observance and this and that, and the other one just has 10 words with corresponding 10 blessings and curses. So they're extremely different. But the interesting thing about this, Ross, is that in chapter 9, verse 5, what we have is it says they brought to the front of the tent of meeting the things that Moses had commanded. And the whole community came forward and they stood before the Lord. And then Moses says, "This is what the Lord has commanded." And then if we go to verse 21 of the same chapter, it says, they elevated the breast and the right thigh and the elevation offering before the Lord as Moses commanded. So which is it? It is seems like a little bit of friction in the text. Your thoughts?
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to go back. I don't think in my translation in the ASV it says the glory. Back in verse 6, 9 verse 6, this is the thing Jehovah commanded that you should do. The glory of Jehovah shall appear unto you. I'm not sure what your translation had. What is
presence. The presence. Yeah, I've got presence of the Lord.
Yeah. I was just going to say that this phrase, the glory, kavod Yehovah, kavod Adonai, for those who prefer not to use the name, is a phrase that's used in 37 times in 36 verses. I just did a search. And it's a lot in the priestly writings. And then, you don't see it much beyond that. But there are passages, particularly in Isaiah, 2nd Isaiah, and Ezekiel, like during the Babylonian, right before the Babylonian captivity and so forth, that it sort of shows up. So some have proposed that is roughly when we would date this material. In other words, it's one of those things that might be a marker. It might be a hint. For what it's worth, this is speculation, but it could be, and I just don't know. But I do think it's interesting that we don't see it very often, other than in these typically priestly texts in the Pentateuch and then late biblical literature.
So good point. As I pointed out, the priestly theophany, the appearance of God before all of the people, appears right here in chapter 9, and as I say, this is to rival the national revelation of Horeb, and the way that this conjuring is done is by offering these particular sacrifices, and it goes into the detail as to how this was done. It says that Moses said to Aaron, "Come forward to the altar and sacrifice your sin offering and your burnt offering, making expiation for yourself and for the people, and sacrifice the people's offering and make expiation for them as the Lord commanded." So that's, again, it seems like there is an offering for all of the people. It seems to do that. Verse 8, Aaron came forward to the altar and slaughtered the calf of the sin offering. Aaron's son brought forward the blood. He dipped his finger in the blood and put it on the horns of the altar. He splashed the rest out of the blood on the base of the altar. The fat, now listen to this, the fat and the kidney. Now this is, again, this
what
is
verse?
the calf.
One more time, make sure I'm on the right verse.
This is chapter 9, verse 8, and now I'm on to verse 10. But I just want to highlight again that this is the calf of the sin offering, right?
All right.
The fat and the kidneys, Ross, and the protuberance of the liver from the sin offering, he turned into smoke on the altar.
So it's gone.
It's gone. He has turned it, and as the Lord commanded Moses, right? And then what we have, and the skin and the flesh were consumed in the fire outside the camp. Then, Ross, he slaughtered the burnt offering. Aaron's sons passed the blood to him, and he dashed it on all the sides of the altar. And they passed the burnt offering to him in sections, as well as the head, yum yum, and he turned it into smoke on the altar. He washed the entrails and the legs and turned them into smoke on the altar with the burnt offering. Next, he brought forward the people's offering. He took the goat for the people's sin offering.
Stop.
He slaughtered it.
Stop.
Go ahead.
Stop. Now we're in verse 15. We're back at the sin offering. Is that you're taking that back? Okay. All right.
All right. Presented as a sin offering like the previous one. He burnt. He brought forward the burnt offering and sacrificed it in accordance to the regulation. Then he brought it forward, the meal offering, and that's the grain. Took a handful of it, turned it into smoke on the altar. In addition to the burnt offering of the morning. Now he slaughtered the ox and the ram, the people's sacrifice of well-being, or some translations, Ross,
peace offering.
Peace offering, right? Mm-hmm. Good. Is that what you've got in the Torah tablet?
Yeah.
Okay, grand. Mm-hmm. Aaron's sons passed the blood to him, which he dashed against every side of the altar, and the fat parts, this is interesting, Ross, this is verse 19, the fat parts of the ox and the ram, the broad tail, the covering fat, the kidneys, and the protuberance of the livers, they laid these fat parts over the breast. Now, I'm curious what you have in verse 20. I've got, they laid these fat parts over the breast, and Aaron turned the fat parts into smoke on the altar. What do you have in 20?
And they put the fat upon the breast, and he burnt the fat upon the altar, and the breast and the right thigh Aaron waved for a wave offering before Jehovah as Moses commanded.
So it's a little bit curious, isn't it? So he places all of the fat parts over the breast, but somehow he turns that which is on top of the breast into smoke on the altar. It's on top of the breast, and then he takes the breast which is underneath and waves it before the Lord. So it's kind of clever the way that he does this. I'm not sure how he achieves this end, but the point is that all of the fat parts he turns into smoke on the altar. That's what it says in verse 20, and we agree with that. The result of all of this is that so Aaron, lifted his hands towards the people and blessed them. He stepped down after offering the sin offering, the burnt offering, and the offering of well-being. There's the three, right? He steps down. Moses and Aaron went inside the tent of meeting. When they came out, Ross, they blessed the people, and the presence of the Lord appeared to all the people. So they were successful in their ritual, in their conjuring, and fire came forth from Jehovah, from the Lord, and consumed the burnt offering and the fat parts on the altar. And all the people saw and shouted and fell on their faces. And this is what they wanted. They wanted to show the people that if we do these things, and if we do it correctly, and we splash the blood like this, and we burn the fat like that, and we do it all like this, that is going to conjure the manifestation of the divine, and you will see it, and you will believe, and you will know for all time going forward that this is the way that things should be done. Your thoughts?
Well, it is, again, it's the first thing that jumps out is that phrase, glory appeared. The glory of the Lord appears. It's interesting that, as you pointed out, this seems to be P's version of the great manifestation. The appearance of God in P is not what we see in the narratives where we saw in Exodus 19, nor what we're going to see in Deuteronomy 5. It's a different, again, it's different. And for P, this is the hierarchy of holiness. At the very top is the tabernacle fully functioning. That's what brings God's presence. That is all that brings God's presence. When we look at Leviticus, That's it. I mean, there's nothing else.
That is it.
That works.
That is it.
That's it.
And the way, and it's different. At Horeb, what we have is a voice that speaks the 10 words audibly to the people out of the fire, right?
Yeah. There's fire. Notice there's fire in both.
There is fire, and they're absolutely petrified. But here, what happens is fire comes out from Jehovah. Now, what does that mean? What does out of Jehovah mean? And I think most commentators conclude that, well, it probably comes from the ark itself, from the magical ark within the Holy of Holies, that this fire shoots out toward the altar, and it consumes the meat and the fat, right? The people see this fire shooting out and consuming it. And by the way, this is a weird thing. In chapter 3, let's go there for a second. This just
where Leviticus 3?
Leviticus chapter 3. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know what to think of this, and maybe you can clarify it for me. Leviticus chapter 3, verses 11 and 6, 16. So 11 says, "The priest shall turn these into smoke on the altar as food, an offering by fire to the Lord." Are we to understand that this is food for God? I mean, it says something similar in verse 16. The priest shall turn these into smoke on the altar as food. Yeah, let's ask Ezra.
Let me throw this thing at Ezra. And Ezra, help us understand the priestly writer associating sacrifices with food for God.
Great question. And you're tapping into one of the deep tensions in biblical theology. From the priestly writer's perspective, especially in Leviticus, sacrifices are clearly framed as food for God. You get language like a food offering made by fire for a sweet savor unto Yahweh. That phrase appears in Leviticus 3 and again in 16, and the Hebrew term literally means bread or food. The image is unmistakable. The altar is Yahweh's table, and the fire consumes the portion meant for him. But then you swing over to texts Psalm 50, and you get a very different take. "If I were hungry, I would not tell thee," God says, "for the world is mine." That psalm, likely from the Elohistic Psalter and outside the priestly tradition, pushes back hard against the idea that God needs the offerings at all. So we've got two theological currents. The priestly source is liturgically focused, ritualistic, and emphasizes sacrificial order as divine nourishment, symbolically, of course. Meanwhile, Psalm 50 is almost polemical. It's as if the psalmist is saying, let's not get carried away here. God's not running a barbecue pit. Both views exist in tension. One sees sacrifice as essential ritual communication, the other as a relational symbol, not a divine meal plan.
Tension in the text.
But it's interesting. He says the image is unmistakable. The altar is Jehovah's table, and the fire consumes the portion meant for him. So he's eating it, right? So let me go back, and this is what the people are witnessing, and this is the priestly revelation narrative. So national revelation narrative. So let's go back to verse 24 of Leviticus 9. "Fire came forth from before the Lord and consumed the burnt offering and the fat parts on the altar." So my question is this, Ross. What fat parts? Because we just read that Aaron turned all the fat into smoke on the altar. So what did I miss something? What did Jehovah consume here?
This is you're saying that this is a problem in the text, like cows that were raised up, that cows were already dead, and then it mentions cows, and so this again we had the fat was consumed. Yeah, I get it. So I guess the question would be: is this just leftover fat? Is
it leftover? And this is we're excellent. So we're left to ask the question: is this leftover fat? I guess we assume that there's leftover fat, even though Aaron, it says that he consumed or turns it all into smoke. There must be some leftover fat, which God says, oh, good, there's some leftover fat. Yum, I'll have that, right? And zaps it with the fire and consumes that. Well, the interesting thing about this, and the reason why I'm being pedantic about it, Ross, is that there is a Dead Sea Scroll. It is 11Q2 Leviticus, otherwise known as 11Q Lev B. Okay. And we have a little bit of additional information. It would appear that our canonical text has been redacted a little, I guess. But prior to that final redaction, there's additional information left in this text. And it says the fat of the peace offering, or the fat of the well-being offering, is what Jehovah consumed. And it's understandable as to why that would have been extracted, because further up in the text, we have Aaron consuming all of that, or turning all of that into fire. And we see that in verses 10 and verse 20 of chapter 9. But Leviticus 11Q2 Leviticus seems to be a text prior to the redaction, Ross.
I would just because it's interesting to me. I'm glad that you brought that up. We always like to bring in Dead Sea Scrolls and other textual traditions when we discuss these things. So one option would be what you just described, that this scroll represents a text that's before a later redaction. It could, I guess,
Maybe.
and I've not studied, it could be the other way around. Maybe the person who wrote 11Q2B or whatever it's called, whichever text is, was it 11Q2B, something like that?
11Q2 Leviticus, yeah.
Yeah. Well, if that's the case, maybe the person who wrote that, as the other option, says, there's a problem with the text. I've got fat, and I'm not supposed to have fat, so I've got to somehow make this work. You know what I'm saying? It could be. Now, the question is, which one came first, though?
Which one came first? That's right. The interesting thing about that is that that's not the only missing piece of information from our Dead Sea Scroll. It continues straight into chapter 10, and in chapter 10, what we have is, as Ezra pointed out, the brutal slaughter of or extermination or execution, I suppose is a better word, of Aaron's sons, Nadab and Abihu. Now, we've already spoken about these guys, and we're going to go into a little bit of detail here, but it kicks off like this. Aaron's sons, and this is straight after God has revealed himself to all the people by consuming the fat, right? Aaron's sons, Nadab and Abihu, each took his fire pan, put fire on it, laid incense on it, and they offered before the Lord. I've got alien fire. What do you have in your Torah
strange tablet? Fire, Jono.
Strange fire.
Yeah.
Which he had not enjoined upon them. And fire came forth from Jehovah and consumed them. Consumed them, Ross. Didn't just electrocute them, didn't just execute them. It's not like he tased them or anything. He consumed them. Thus they died at the instance of the Lord. And then Moses said, oh, well, we'll go on about that. But the interesting thing about this, in as far as our Dead Sea Scroll is concerned, 11Q2 Leviticus, is that it says Nadab and Abihu, the two sons of Aaron. Now, we don't have two in our canonical text. And what this Dead Sea Scroll might be suggesting is that Aaron only had two sons. These are the two sons of Aaron, you see.
Okay.
Each took his censer. So just returning to the Anchor commentary that we were talking about earlier on, the Anchor commentary on Exodus chapter 6, verse 23, where these two names are first mentioned, and it's talking about the genealogy, if you like, of Aaron and his sons and all that sort of stuff. And this section, I think, Richard Elliott Freeman says that this is the redactor citing from the Book of Records. But in the Anchor commentary, where Nadab and Abihu are first mentioned, it says Nadab and Abihu die in Leviticus 10 after offering, quote, strange fire before Yahweh. Presumably, they were ancestors of Aaronic lines that either die out or were considered illegitimate by the priestly writer, right? Or perhaps, and that's where the quote ends. But what I'd like to propose, Ross, is that perhaps, and this is what we talked about when they first appeared in previous Torah portions, perhaps they were invented initially as the only sons of Aaron for the purpose of likening him to Jeroboam, Jeroboam's sons being Nadab and Abihu. And as we mentioned back then, you can't have a Yahwistic theophoric name back in the Torah because we don't have any, with the possible exception of Joshua.
Maybe Joshua.
And so maybe the writer is entwining the sin of Jeroboam with the sin of the golden calf narrative at Horeb into one e-source narrative, and that is the e-source. So being fabricated and therefore having no descendants, it was necessary for the p-source to create a narrative of their demise, Ross, but also to insert two replacement heirs to the priesthood, and that would be Itamar and Eleazar. Whatever the case, Ross, perhaps 11Q2 Leviticus represents a text where Nadab and Abihu are the only sons of Aaron before the E and P narratives were sort of worked together, where Aaron's two sons are omitted. The word two is omitted. Now, it's not the only text that does that. In our own canonical text, Exodus chapter 24, verses 1 and verses 9 seems to suggest that these two guys are Aaron's only sons. What are your thoughts?
So you're suggesting, and it's interesting, that perhaps the story is sort of a back to the future kind of thing, where the writer goes back into the text to explain this missing family line, maybe a priesthood, a portion of the priesthood that was cut off, or am I misreading that?
I think that our canonical text, in light of this Dead Sea Scroll, may have taken out the word two, suggesting that Aaron has only two sons.
I got you.
Because we need an Aaronic line. I mean, the whole priestly material is off the fact that there's an already existing sacrificial system that they are officiating, and they need to go back and give this Mosaic authority. This is the whole point of these narratives. So we have to take out two. We don't want to suggest that they're his only sons, and we have to inject a couple more sons in there.
Itamar and Eleazar.
His line goes on, and so for example, chapter 24 of Exodus, it says, "And he said to Moses, 'Come up to the Lord with Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, and the 70 elders.'" Where are the other two boys? And I think verse 9 says something similar. "Then Moses said to Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, and the 70 elders of Israel that they ascended." Blah blah blah. Well, where are the other boys? So
let me do. Can I bring Ezra in quickly and let's just kind of drill down just one little bit. Let's see if Ezra can help us explain a little bit more about the idea that there is a story around the kingdom of Jeroboam that may reflect. It sounds very similar to these names here. How about let's do that?
Go ahead.
That's a fascinating line of scholarly speculation, and it gets right into the documentary and historical critical layers of the text. Nadab and Abihu, Aaron's sons who are struck down in Leviticus 10, bear names that seem oddly resonant with the northern kingdom's royal line. Nadab is, of course, the name of Jeroboam's son, who becomes king of Israel after him, and not a particularly righteous one, according to the Deuteronomistic historians. Abihu, while less directly attested, is structurally similar in form to names like Abijah, Aviah, Jeroboam's other son, and even parallels theophoric naming conventions used in the north. So here's where the theory gets interesting. Some scholars suggest that the story of Nadab and Abihu is a priestly polemic, essentially a retrojection of a warning against northern cultic innovations. Jeroboam, you'll remember, famously sets up rival shrines at Bethel and Dan, complete with unauthorized priests and altars. The priestly source, writing from a southern post-exilic vantage, may be using Nadab and Abihu to symbolize the dangers of offering strange fire, i.e., illegitimate worship outside of the authorized Aaronid system. If that's the case, the names aren't just coincidental. They may carry a subtle jab, a literary echo of disobedient sons, both priestly and royal, whose innovations lead to divine rejection. It's a theological cautionary tale encoded in genealogy.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yep. That is interesting. And one thing that Ezra didn't mention, and something that we mentioned, back when we were talking about the golden calf incident, that particular Torah portion, is that, of course, Aaron is made to say, "These are your gods, O Israel, that brought you up out of Egypt," which is quoting from Jeroboam, because he has a calf at Bethel and Dan, as Ezra just said. But the interesting thing about that, of course, is that we pointed out at the time, is that there's only one calf that they made. So why is Aaron saying about a singular calf, these are your gods, O Israel, that brought you up out of Egypt? So there's a number of other parallels too, and Richard Elliott Friedman goes into detail on those. But that is the theory. There is a theory, and I think it's one that needs to be seriously considered. Your thoughts?
I think it's really, I'm actually taking notes right now to follow up on a little bit that Ezra just brought to my attention. I've seen the theory before, but there is quite a bit out there among scholars who propose documentary hypothesis and so forth that suggests that some of this language in the different sources is polemical, particularly from the authorized priesthood against practices from the north. So this has my wheels spinning a little bit. I'm going to have to go and look at that a little bit.
Wheels spinning. So coming back to 10:2, and fire came forth from the Lord. So this is exactly the same as 9:24. Fire comes forth, and this is very Indiana Jones, is it not, Ross? I mean, surely this is where that imagery comes from at the end of the Indiana Jones and the what is it?
Temple of Doom, or
Raiders of the Lost Ark, where at the end he says to Marion, "Don't look at it," and then all the lightning comes forth and kills all the Nazis. Whee! And great movie. But surely this is where that imagery comes from.
Aish Zara. It's strange fire. The only thing close to that, you may have brought this up, is
I've got Doris
the phrase,
singing that in the back of my mind now. Aish Shara.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Aish Zara, Exodus 30 and verse 9. Strange incense, Jono, strange incense. So some have purported. Now, the question is, I don't know, are you ready to entertain a couple? I mean, we're going long with this one, I think, but I just, why are they consumed? The question, I'm thinking of Uzzah reaching out to touch he was it something like that, because this idea begins to be very popular in rabbinic literature. Those who are close to God, you judged with a harsher judgment. And so you mess up in the realm of holiness. See, I think we've maybe lost a little bit of understanding these realms of holiness, according to people like Milgram. It's not like you just, the boys meant well. They just messed up, and their zeal they went in to do, and they got struck down. Uzzah didn't want the ark to fall, but it's, we know from the priestly writer, it's not supposed to be carried on a wagon. You got to pay attention to detail.
We are going to eventually come to another narrative where there is some crossover, and eventually that's going to be Numbers chapter 16, and specifically verse 18 and verse 35, and this is the whole Korah rebellion. But just to highlight it, it says in those verses, each of them took his fire pan, put fire on it, laid incense on it, and took his place at the entrance of the tent of meeting, as did Moses and Aaron. And of course, those guys, the Korahites, turned out to be the losers in this competition. And it says, and the actually, you know what's cool? A little bit further up in verse 19, I just noticed, and the presence of the Lord appeared to the whole community. So we have that again.
Glory of the Lord, the glory of the Lord.
Glory of the Lord, verse 19. And then in verse 35, and fire went forth from the Lord and consumed the 250 men offering the incense. So very, very similar formula. It's interesting, just coming back to the question that you were asking. It consumes their bodies, but not their clothes, because they're carried out, their corpses. And now, of course, the sanctuary, by the way, is contaminated by corpses. They don't seem to mind too much about that. You're going to have to have some
ashes of the red heifer.
Gotta have to kill some more animals to remedy that. But they are carried, their corpses or their skeletons, but who knows, is carried out by their clothes, which remain intact.
Wow. Well, it's kind of like the fat. The fat is consumed, and I'm trying to make a connection here. The fat's consumed, and the breast is not. And in this case,
maybe God ate them. Maybe Jehovah ate them. Good heavens! I never thought of that, Ross. But maybe that's what this is, because that's what apparently is happening in verse 24 of chapter 9.
You see, this is what gets us in trouble, Jono. This is you've gone.
Just telling you what the text said.
Speaking of Korah, in the text it says you've gone too far. You've gone too far. Remember that? Remember that phrase?
Yeah.
It's too much. See,
Cross the
Jono,
line.
you've gone too far. You crossed the line.
Cross the line.
What did they do, though, Jono? That's the question. What did they do, regardless of what happened to them?
We're not exactly sure, are we? We're not exactly sure, except that it says that they offered coals, perhaps with incense upon them, that wasn't part of the magical concoction.
It's alien.
And it cost them. It's alien. It's foreign. And after it happens, the thing that I really find this, like Ezra said, it's brutal. But I mean, look, and Moses turns to Aaron after this and he says, look, he basically says, I told you so. I told you so. If you don't do it exactly right, this is what the Lord said would happen. And this is after Aaron, like, we're to understand that Aaron just lost his 2 eldest sons.
Yeah, totally consumed.
Perhaps at the time when this was originally written, it was his only sons. We don't know, but priestly material, so maybe, I don't know. But he says, totally consumes. I told you so. Don't grieve, by the way, because, and we highlighted this in a previous Torah portion, get on with the job. Otherwise, Jehovah might kill you if you don't finish what you're doing, and also take it out on the community. So everyone is at risk right now. If you don't finish the job, what you've started, not only is your life in jeopardy, but he's going to just take it out on everybody. This is what Moses says in chapter 10. And then at this point, Ross, and you might have a little bit more to say about this. At this point, this is the weirdest thing. It's absurd, really. Jehovah takes this opportunity to speak directly to Aaron, and I don't know that this happens at any other place in the text where the divine speaks directly to Aaron, not to Moses.
What verse? What verse is that?
This is chapter 10, verses 8 to 11. And he basically takes the opportunity to say, hey, by the way, finish the job that you're doing, but also, just want you to know, I'm just going to mention right now, because this is an opportune moment, that here we have a no alcohol workplace policy. All right, so just remember that. Right, as you were, keep going.
Now, let me jump in, because some people have said that Aaron's sons might have been, tipping Grandpa's cough syrup, and so they were a little bit under the influence when they went in. That could be. Right. I mean, I don't know this, but that's one of the theories. Now, you might say, well, but why kill them if they didn't know the rule? Now the rule is in place, but that doesn't help Aaron any, because he's just lost his 2 sons. However, so we don't know. It's just because of proximity, because this just happened. And then God, as you pointed out, we don't have another text where he speaks directly to Aaron, but here he does, and he says, no drinking in the tent. So some people have assumed that maybe that was the cause of Aaron's sons, Nadab and Abihu, getting lit up.
That's right, and I'm going to say that is a desperate attempt to make sense of this absurd passage. That's what I'm going to say. I think, because if we deal with the words that are on the page, they were consumed by Jehovah because they offered strange fire, not because they'd been drinking. I mean, it says what it says. It's just that right here, it appears that Jehovah takes the opportunity. This is an opportune time just to remind you, we have a no alcohol workplace policy, by the way.
Yeah.
It doesn't stop there, Ross. Moses then turns to Aaron and says, hey, by the way, before you finish up and go and mourn the loss of your sons who have just been consumed by Jehovah, make sure you eat all the holy food in the holy place, right? Because I'm sure you have an appetite after all of this. And and if that wasn't enough, then the remainder of the chapter has Moses berating Aaron's sons, his remaining sons, Itamar and Eleazar, for not eating the sin offering and effectuating the expiation of guilt from the community. All right, what are your thoughts on that? Because honestly, this is one of the weirder chapters. I mean, Leviticus chapter 10 is just super, super weird. Go ahead.
It's one of those that a lot of religious people don't want to touch with a 10-foot pole. As we say, you read it and you feel for Aaron, you feel for the whole family, And if this represents a chronological telling, remember, this is one of the very few places where we have narrative inserted in the midst of law. But assuming that this is right after the fact, as it's presented in the text, it's certainly shocking. You would think there would be a little more, but like you said, people might get a little nervous. But it says very clearly, hey, pick up your boots. Let's go. You don't have time to mourn. You've got to keep the job going.
Yeah. You know what it reminds me of, Ross? And a lot of movies have been made about this because it is so shocking. Is the Catholic missionaries, if you like, back in medieval times that would go around scaring people with hellfire, the threat of hellfire. So much so by actually having fire and holding their arm over the fire and going, "Do you want this for eternity?" All this sort of stuff, and scaring people into Catholic observance and purchasing indulgences and so on and so forth. Yeah, indulgences and so on and so forth. And this is how they made their money. I mean, when you go to, and I've been to the Vatican, you walk into St. Peter's Square and all this sort of stuff, and in the Vatican, you see the vast, incredible, spectacular wealth that was built off fear and selling indulgences and so on and so forth. Yeah. You can see that's really quite effective. And I really do think that passages like this are designed specifically for that purpose.
Man. It certainly is. It's certainly one of those stories that makes you feel kind of, I don't know, cringe. Wow. I mean, even where Uzzah reaches out to stop the ark, and he gets struck, and you think, man,
he was only trying to help.
Yeah,
he meant well.
But again, one more point. But people say, well, it's supposed to be it's supposed to be borne on shoulders and not carried. So they weren't following the instructions. So there's no leeway when it comes to the priestly exercise of priestly rules. There's no room for error. None.
I'll tell you what, when you hold these two belief systems side by side, Ross, one here you have the 10 words in the Moses scroll and the corresponding blessings and curses, and over here you've got all of these rules and regulations and the blood and the executions and all this stuff. It's a very, very easy decision, is all I'm saying.
Man, I love the Bible. I'm telling you, there are so many cool things in the Bible, and strange and weird, and But look, before we leave chapter 10, speaking of strange things, do we have time to hit one more in 10?
Please, go ahead.
So I learned this from my Hebrew teacher years ago, back in the 90s. It was just kind of one of those neat little rabbinic nuggets that I used to so long for. And the idea is this: if you were to imagine in the Torah, in Hebrew, are there an even number of words or an odd number of words? Because this is coming from a fundamentalist standpoint, that the Torah is perfect, every word, every letter is there for a reason. This is the way it was presented to me back in the 90s. Even or odd? What would you guess?
That's such a weird question. Ask the question again. Is the number of Hebrew words in the Torah?
Yeah. Even or odd?
Even or odd. So the total vocabulary,
not
don't even
vocabulary.
know.
So let me give you the answer. All right,
here
we
go. Actual words.
The total number of words. If you had to. So according to rabbinic tradition, there are an even number of words in the Torah. And I don't remember the number off the top of my head. The center of the Torah, according to the notes, like in other words, I have a BHS, Biblia Hebraica Stuttgartensia. If I open up the Hebrew text to Leviticus 10:16, in Hebrew, the note, or Aramaic, I can't remember, it says that this is the midpoint of the Torah. And in the midst of the Torah, the word Derosh is twice. So the middle of the Torah is Derosh Darash. Here in chapter 10, verse 16, Moses diligently sought. The word Derosh means to seek. Darash means to seek. So he sought, this sin offering. Of course, the priestly writer would have that to be the heart of the Torah, Jono, is seeking, because the middle word is Derosh mentioned twice. There you go. It's just a little bit of fundamentalism for you.
Just on that, Ross, it is a curious thing. I mean, that verse, when Moses inquired, when Moses inquired about the goat of sin offering, and it had already been burned, and I've got an exclamation mark there, he was angry with Eleazar and Ithamar. Okay, Aaron's remaining sons we have here.
Yeah.
He said, why didn't you do it the way that it was supposed to be done? And he goes on to Aaron about this, and the response from Aaron is this. See, this day they brought their sin offering and their burnt offering before Jehovah, and such things have befallen me. Talking about the loss of his boys.
I assume. Yeah.
Had I eaten sin offering today, would the Lord have approved? Now, the thing about this is that what Aaron's argument is saying, look, this is the reason why I haven't done it specifically to the letter of the law.
It's been a bad day. Yeah.
And Moses is like, yeah, I guess so. I guess it has been a bad day. All right, well, I guess we'll let that one slide. And evidently, Aaron lives and the people aren't punished, and so perhaps Jehovah let that one slide too. And yet, because we're to believe that Abihu and Nadab offer strange fire and are executed by Jehovah consuming them, it just seems a little bit inconsistent, let's say.
All right.
Speaking of consuming things, Ross, chapter 11. I don't know about you. Well, let me put this out there. I do not believe. I just want to be really blunt now about all this stuff.
What do you mean you're going to be really blunt now? Like you hadn't been?
I'm just getting more. I guess I'm rapidly turning into a grumpy old man.
You are really that way, but we're only in Leviticus.
I'm telling you now, right? I do not believe that Leviticus chapter 11, Deuteronomy chapter 14 are divinely imparted. I don't believe that this diet is a diet that is imparted from God at Horeb or anything. We don't have it in the Moses Scroll. Having said that, Ross, because I have observed this diet for something like, 15 plus years, maybe 2 decades, it is difficult for me to even consider having a ham sandwich. I haven't, and I don't know if I ever will. It's my diet is what it is, and I don't know if I'm ever going to have anything unclean again. I am a herbivore and I'm an omnivore, really. Quite happy
you do eat a lot of vegetables, though. Is that right? I mean, you do
have a lot of vegetables, a lot of salads, and a lot of protein, a lot of meat. But beef, lamb, goat, chicken, fish. No ham. What can I ask you what your diet's like these days?
Yeah, when we first met, I was pretty strict with vegetarianism, as you recall. In fact, I used to catch it on the Tanakh tour. People would tease me, and you remember we'd go to the burger bar, and they would make me this special mushroom burger.
Oh, the mushroom burger, yeah, nice.
Remember that? Now, that's pretty good. Remember they put pineapple on it? It was really good. But then I got off of the diet. But I have at times gone back and forth. Now, like you, since I don't know when, the late 80s, I've eaten biblically clean. Never have I intentionally gone to eat off the unclean list, whether it's Leviticus 11 or Deuteronomy 14. Having said that, for a while I did pescatarian, and then I just went back to eating only clean off the clean list. But recently, very recently,
so when you're eating, you
eat vegetables, fruit. The only flesh you eat is fish, and so I did that. But just recently, within the last several weeks, I've gone back to a vegetarian diet. For me, I've always felt better with that diet, and but anyway, so that's my diet right now. But this is one of the most heated arguments or discussions that people can have, because it feels like to me that whether a person, no matter where they're at on any of the biblical diets, others feel like they're being judged. Like I remember when I first gave up eating pork. I'm talking about in the 80s. People were asking me, what's wrong with that? You don't know Jesus said all things are clean. You can, it doesn't matter what goes into the mouth, but what comes out of the mouth. You remember all those things. So
and
you get
I would
through
always,
that.
I would always reply to people this way with that, because I went through that as well. And I'd say to them, well, just because you can swallow it doesn't make it food. So all
that's
food
right.
is clean. You know, sand, you can swallow it, but it's not food, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, and that was the way it was. And living in Louisiana, it was very difficult for me to eat biblically kosher if you go out, because you know a lot of people say, well, don't go out to a non-kosher restaurant. Well, that's not going to happen in Louisiana. So you have to go out and you have to say, you know, I have to eat this, but I can't eat pork, I can't eat crawfish, shellfish, you know, all the unclean things. That and several other things. I read a book called A Diet for a New America back in the day by the guy who was the heir to the Baskin-Robbins chain, and it was just about the horrors of processing of meats and so forth.
And listen, that's true.
It shocked me.
And that is true.
It shocked me.
I've talked about this before, where you know, because we had goats and I would slaughter the goats and so on and so forth. And at one time we had a few too many goats, and I thought, I'm just going to take it to the abattoir. And I went there and I swore I would never do that again. It is a horrifying place. It really, really is. Industrial slaughter of animals. I just decided I am going to do this. These are my animals. I raise them. I will slaughter them in the most humane way possible. And there is a difference. And you know, there's something to be said about reforming that system, perhaps. But keep going.
Well, I was just going to say that all of these different things, and this is not, you know, people, again, they always feel the weight of judgment. For me, all of these different things have sort of come together for me presently, and I'm just recently going back onto this diet, and but I tell you, in fact, I think this coming Saturday I'm going to talk all about biblical diets. But one question that I have, you started this piece by saying that you don't feel like Leviticus 11 and Deuteronomy 14 represent a divine diet. What if they were? Why, may I ask, would we have two different sections of the Pentateuch with different versions of the diet if it's all penned by Moses? That's question number one for me. Can we ask Ezra to, Ezra, can you tell us maybe are they consistent one with the other, or do we have
what are the discrepancies between Leviticus 11 and Deuteronomy 14?
Yes, and the discrepancies are subtle, but they matter, especially from a text-critical standpoint. Leviticus 11, part of the priestly source, is very systematic and cultic in tone. It's focused on ritual purity. The classification is structured around anatomical features: split hooves, chewing cud, fins, and scales. It's essentially a taxonomy of purity, aligned with the broader priestly concern for maintaining order and boundaries, especially as they relate to the sanctuary. Deuteronomy 14, on the other hand, belongs to the Deuteronomistic tradition. It's more sermonic, more concerned with obedience and covenant identity than with ritual precision. While the basic categories overlap, the language shifts. There's less technical vocabulary and more emphasis on being a holy people to Yahweh. The Deuteronomic list adds details in places like explicitly permitting certain locusts and omits others, like the more technical skin touch impurity details you find in Leviticus. One notable example: in Leviticus, the pig is unclean because it has a split hoof but doesn't chew the cud. In Deuteronomy, that reasoning is there too, but the tone is less clinical. It's more about reinforcing Israel's distinction from the nations. So, while the two chapters mostly agree on the what, they diverge in the why and how. Priestly Leviticus is concerned with cultic order. Deuteronomic Deuteronomy is concerned with covenantal obedience. Two different theological aims, using similar dietary laws to say different things.
Oh, well, is there anything that you would add to that, or anything you would disagree with?
No, I tell you, it's interesting, though. The language is quite interesting, and one of the things that, if you notice the end of the list in Leviticus 11, verse 43, ye, plural, shall not make yourselves abominable with any creeping thing that creepeth, neither shall ye make yourselves unclean with them, that ye should be defiled thereby. For I am Jehovah your God. Sanctify yourselves therefore, and be ye holy, for I am holy. Neither shall ye defile yourself with any manner of creeping thing that moveth upon the earth. For I am Jehovah that brought you up out of the land of Egypt to be your God. You shall therefore be holy, for I am holy. Then I would just say that is interestingly almost what we read in Deuteronomy 14, verses 1 through 2. It begins with your children of the Lord your God, your sons of Jehovah, if you will. And then it begins to say, be holy, so don't defile yourself. So there very, very much overlap there. There is, from the priestly standpoint, there is a touching of holiness and diet. And I'm going to get into this, like I said, this Saturday. I will say that there are some very interesting facts about diet in the Bible. And I would also say that we eat, most people in developed nations are going to eat 2 to 3 meals a day, every day. So you can almost imagine that something to do with diet would at least be in the minds of people, and God would have to give a diet, right? I mean, you would think it's something that humans partake in. This is the way a lot of people view this.
One thing that we haven't mentioned, we'll just mention it very briefly here because it's time to wrap up, and that is, of course, there is priestly crumbs, if you like, buried in the book of Genesis in the Noah story in this regard, in chapter 7 and in chapter 9, where it talks about clean and unclean animals. And this is, retrojected into the text. And it comes from here, obviously. And so that's an interesting thing. And then there's the whole question of, he brings 7 clean so that he can sacrifice and eat them, once they get off the ark, whereas it's 2 of everything that's unclean. Or in one source, it is 2 of everything. In another source, it's 7 and 2. Anyway, we dealt with that back there, and people can look at that in Noah. I think, are we done, Russ? Is there anything else that you want to talk about then?
Well, there's tons I want to talk about, Jono, but I think we've just gone really long, and so we want to tell everybody thank you for sticking with us this long, and we want to encourage people, Jono, to continue to give us feedback. Make some comments, leave comments on the video. That's right. We're
going to get into those. We will be back this time next week with Tazria kicking off from chapter 12.
Oh, boy.
No. This one.
Oh, boy. Yeah.
If you thought I was blunt in this one, then wait till next week. I'm telling you, we have to do it.
Let me ask you this. Are Tazria and Metzorah, are they combined this year or no? Because sometimes they put them together and you can just get through
sometimes they do. Oh, we're going to have to look into that. All right, we'll be back this time next week. And until then, have a great one. Ezra, take us out.
All right, friends. That's where we'll land the plane for Torah portion, Shemini. From divine fire and fallen priests to the deep logic of Israel's sacred diet, we've seen how this portion speaks in layers. Ritual, theology, and maybe even a little political memory baked into the names. If this kind of text-critical deep dive stirs your curiosity, or maybe just helps make sense of the strangeness of Leviticus, go ahead and give this video a like. Share it with your fellow Bible nerds, your synagogue study crew, or even that one friend who insists God's got a barbecue going up in heaven. Leave us a comment. What stuck with you from Shemini? What questions are burning in your scrolls? Until next time, keep turning those pages and asking the hard questions. Ezra, signing off from Torah Pearls.